What is up, guys? My name is Ben Hartwell. Thanks for checking out the channel. If it's your first time here, or even if it's not, why not hit that subscribe button? So I've had a couple of questions off you guys asking about one thing in particular with the songs that I've been making, and that is my master bus processing. Now, I always want to give you guys the content that you want to see, and whilst I don't really consider myself a mastering engineer, I'm going to show you the way that I do it to get the sounds that I'm after. This is in no way a mastering tutorial. These aren't necessarily even best practices or really the way that you should be doing things. These are just the way that I do things at the moment to get the sounds that I'm after. I do want to preface this by saying there is no magic master bus chain. There's no secret set of plugins that is just going to make your mix sound amazing. And also, what one person thinks sounds great might sound like total crap to another set of ears. But over the years, I have developed a way of doing things to get the sounds that I'm after. So let's jump into Luna and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so we're in Luna and this is the session for the song that you heard at the start of the video, which at the time of recording, I don't have a name for yet, but by the time this video comes out, I probably will. So I'll just go through the setup of this session with you. Fairly straightforward session. Got all the drums in red. These blue tracks are the bass. I've got a bunch of guitars, some ambient guitars, some chug guitars, heavier stuff, and the guitar solo. Each of those sets of instruments get sent to its own bus. So I've got the drum bus, the bass bus, ambient guitar bus, heavy guitars, and a guitar solo bus. And all of those buses then get sent to this master fader, where I do all of the master bus processing. Editing Ben here, so I forgot to mention these two tracks that are hidden behind me, and they are reference tracks. I think it's a really good idea to find commercially available music that sounds similar to the mix or the master that you're going for, and be constantly checking it against that reference material. So those are two tracks that I really like the sound of, that I can check my mix against. They go to their own master fader with no processing on it, so I can bounce between my mix and those reference tracks. I like to work doing a technique called top-down mixing, where you already have some processing set up on the master bus and you mix into that processing. I know a lot of guys have started mixing this way. People like Nolly from Get Good Drums and Periphery like to mix this way, and I think it's a really good way to mix because it forces you to make mix decisions based on how that audio is affecting those plugins that you've got on the master chain. And it also helps you get to a more finished sounding mix during that mixing process. So usually I will have these four plugins already set up on my master bus. And those are the Pultec EQ, the FabFilter Pro Q3, the Shadow Hills Master Bus Compressor, and the Waves Kramer tape. And as for the settings of those plugins whilst I'm doing my mixing, I'll leave the Pultec in its default state. I just like to run through it whilst I'm doing my mixing and have it ready to do my final EQ tweaks on the whole mix. I have the Pro Q3 set up to remove some of the low end that we don't need in the mix, but I'll go through that a bit later on. I set the Shadow Hills Master Compressor up just to do a dB of gain reduction, just to help glue things together whilst I'm mixing. And then there's a preset on the Kramer tape that I'll show you a little later on that just really helps open out the mix. So once I've got to a point where I'm quite happy with how the mix is sounding, I'll bounce out a stereo mix with all this master bus processing turned off and re-import it back into Luna, which is this track here that you can see mix bounce. That way I can turn off all this processing, saving some CPU, and then I can turn the Ozone on, which is quite a CPU intensive program. And so I can't use all of this processing all at the same time because this older computer is just not capable of doing it. So as you can see, I've turned off all of the processing on all of the tracks. I've turned off all the tape, all the Neve summing, apart from what's on my master bus. So let me show you through each of these plugins that I'm using and I'll show you what they're doing. The first plugin that I'm using on the master bus is the Pultec EQ, and I'm just using it as a kind of overall tone shaper for the whole mix. I'm not doing a whole lot with it. I'm just boosting some low end at 200, a tiny little boost at 1.5, and then I'm doing a bit of the Pultec trick where I'm boosting and attenuating the same frequency at 100 Hertz, just to really help bring up the bass and bring up the thump of the kick. And I'm doing the same thing at around 10K just because I felt the mix was a little bit dark. And so by boosting up there, it's really helping to bring out some of the cymbals and some of the articulation in the guitars. So I'll show you what the mix sounds like without the Pultec and then I'll bring it in. So as you can see, it does add quite a bit of volume, but what I'm mostly using it for is to bring out all that low end. The next plugin in my master chain is the Pro Q3, my absolute favorite EQ plugin. This thing is amazing. I use it on absolutely everything, but on the master bus, I'm using it for a very specific reason, and that is because you can run this EQ in mid-side. So what I'm doing with this band here is it's set to side, as you can see here, and I'm cutting everything below 100 Hertz, as that's just low end information that I don't want in the width of my mix. Then in this band, I've got it set to mid, and I'm cutting everything below 20 Hertz, as all that low end information is going to clutter up the mix, so I just use this to get rid of it. So I'll let you hear what this plugin's doing, although I'm not entirely sure how well this will come across on YouTube. So here's the mix without the Pro Q in. And here's with it turned on. So the next plugin that I have in the chain is the awesome Shadow Hills Master Compressor. I've only started using this pretty recently. Up until about a month ago, I was using the Waves bus compressor, but I saw a few videos of people using this Shadow Hills compressor, including a mix breakdown by Rabia, and I was just blown away by how good it sounds and how awesome it looks. And as it was around Christmas and there was a load of deals going at the time, I managed to get it for a really good deal from Plugin Alliance. If you don't know much about this compressor, it's basically two compressors in one. I only really ever run it in stereo mode, so you can forget the right hand side of this plugin, as everything then is controlled on the left side. It has an optical compressor and a discrete compressor, and they basically work in tandem. It also has 3 different selectable transformers, each affecting the sound just a little bit differently and each adding a different kind of harmonic content. I like it on the steel setting, which is the most aggressive sounding one. And the way I set the compressor up is just to be getting a dB or 2 from each of the individual compressors. So I'll play through the track and I'll punch the compressor in and out. So you can see that this compressor isn't doing a whole lot. In the quieter parts of the track, that needle is barely moving on each of those compressors. I'm just using it to glue all those instruments together. The next plugin that I have in the chain is the Kramer Master Tape. This is a really great sounding tape emulator. At some point, I probably will move to one of the UAD Master Tape extensions that they have in Luna, but at the moment, I really like this plugin. All I do with it is I set it to a preset that's called Master Soft Clean Compression, push up the record level a little bit just to help drive the tape and back off the flux. The reason I back off that flux dial is I really don't like what it does to the guitars. It seems to introduce some digital noise that I just really don't like, so I dial it back until that disappears. What I like about this tape plugin is it seems to really open up the mix and add some width to it. So to show you that, I'm going to turn off Ozone and then I'll punch in and out the tape. So you can hear there that this plugin is also helping glue the mix together, but it's that width and that openness that I really like from this tape plugin. The last plugin that I have in the chain is Ozone from iZotope. This version is Ozone Standard, and if you don't know what Ozone is, you can kind of think of it as like a complete mastering suite. It has all these separate modules that you can have in whatever order you want. The way I use it is I first use the Master Assistant, which offers up some kind of recommended settings to help with your master. I then go through and tweak those settings that it's given me and add any other modules that I want to include. So with this mix, the Master Assistant gave me an EQ first. The curve was initially much more extreme than this. I've just dialed it back to where it sounded good to me. It then gave me a dynamic EQ, just notching out a few problem frequencies. I'll turn off the other modules and I'll let you listen to what those two EQs are doing. So hopefully there you can hear it's not doing a massive amount, it's just helping control some of that mid-range and adding a little bit of brightness. The next module along is one that I like to add myself, and that is the stereo imager. I like to have a lot of width in my mixes, so this module allows me to do that. It lets me push whatever frequencies I want out to the sides and narrow in other frequencies to the center image. The way I use it is I set up 3 separate bands, a low, mid and a high. For all that high information, things like cymbals, I like to push that way out wide. As you can see here, I'm pushing the stereo image quite far up. For my middle band, I like to give just a little bit of stereo widening, and then for my low band, I like to pull it back to try and keep things like the kick and the bass right up the middle. I'll turn the imager off and on to show you what it's doing. So hopefully there you can hear how much wider the mix gets and how much bigger and fuller it sounds with that module engaged. The next module along is another one that I like to add, and that's the exciter. Not doing a whole lot through this module, it allows you to add harmonic content and different kinds of distortion to separate frequency bands. So I just find a preset that I like, tweak it a little bit till I get what I'm after. And I use it in conjunction with the next module along, which is the vintage tape module. Again, I just find a preset that I like within the module and tweak it until I get the sound I'm after. So I'll show you what those two modules are doing. So you can kind of hear that they complement each other quite well, and I really like what they do to the mid frequencies in the guitars. The last module in the chain is the maximizer, and all I'm really using this for is to get my volume up. I aim to get a LUFS reading of -9, as I think that's a happy medium of being a loud enough master, but not being so loud that it's going to get turned down on streaming services. A really good way of checking this is to use the loudness penalty website, where it will look at your track and it will tell you how much it'll get turned down by each of the streaming sites. And I find by mastering at about -9 LUFS, I'm getting turned down by about a dB. And it gives me a happy medium of retaining plenty of dynamic range in my mix, being loud enough, but also not being so loud that it's going to get turned down. So let me show you what the maximizer is doing. So you can see at the loudest part of the track, we were getting up to -9.2. Could definitely push this track further and get a louder master out of it, but I want to retain as much dynamic range as I can in my mix. So let me show you what all those modules are doing to the mix by bypassing Ozone, and then I'll bring it back in again. So there you can hear that this plugin really brings the track to life. It's not just giving me the volume that I need, it's also giving me all that stereo width, some nice mid-range harmonic content, and an overall EQ balance. So I'll bypass all my master bus processing and I'll bring in each plugin one at a time so you can hear what they're doing. So there you go. That's my current master bus processing for 2021. So there you go, guys. That is the way that I'm currently doing my master bus processing in Luna in 2021. Not necessarily the correct way or even the best way of doing things. It's just the way that I personally am doing things at the moment to get the sounds that I'm after. You might find that some of these techniques work great for you. You might find that some of them are just totally not what you're after. The best advice I can give is to watch a whole load of videos on YouTube on how other people are doing their master bus processing, and then experiment with a few different techniques and see what works for the kind of music that you want to create. So I hope some of you guys found this video useful and I hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up below. If you want to watch another video on my channel, you can do it just up here. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do it right there. I'll see you in the next one.